Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What urban legend scares you the most? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My favorite is called genetic memory. Many classic horror icons such as Geiger xenomorphs, Silent Hill's Pyramid Head, and other disturbing creatures share common characteristics. Pale skin, dark sunken eyes, elongated faces, sharp teeth, and the like. These images inspire horror and revulsion in many, and with good reason. The characteristics shared by these faces are imprinted in the human mind. Many things frighten humans instinctively. The fear is natural and does not need to be reinforced in order to terrify. The fears are species-wide, stemming from dark times in the past when lightning could mean the burning of your tree home, thunder could be the approaching gallops of a stampede, predators could hide in the darkness, and heights could make poor footing lethal. The question you have to ask yourself is this: what happened deep in the hidden eras before history began that could affect the entire human race so evenly as to give the entire species a deep, instinctual, and lasting fear of pale beings with dark, sunken eyes, razor-sharp teeth, and elongated faces? Just be careful out there. I remember watching a program on TV when I was a kid about physically violent poltergeists that terrorized a young boy. The thing that bothered me the most about what I saw wasn't the fact that the poltergeist could move things and hurt him, but the fact that he couldn't escape from it. His family would move across the country to different locations all throughout his childhood, but the poltergeist followed them everywhere. The strangest and creepiest part was that the poltergeist would stay dormant for a few months after they moved to a new place, and then it would announce its presence on a random night with a particularly loud and violent outburst, throwing chairs, turning lights on and off, making the electronics hum with strange noises, shaking the mattresses, etc. That concept still terrifies me now, and even more so when I was a kid. Decide that a horrible thing could stay with you for that long and terrorize you when you least expected it. Had nightmares for months afterwards, and I still think about that TV program to this day. I kinda wish I knew what channel it was on or what show, but it was such a long time ago, and I was really young when I watched it. When I was younger, I was pretty afraid of walking in the woods alone. Too many misleading stories of moose being man-slaughtering evil killing machines and badgers eating your leg with no provocation. Nowadays, I jog at 2 a.m. deep in the forest and the like and think nothing of it. However, a few days ago, I heard some woman's wretched screaming deep into the woods, then loud frantic sobbing. Then it stopped. It sounded like it was close, so I went panicky as F and tried to see if I could see who they were since it sounded like it was around 15 meters up the trail, but I couldn't see anything. I was terrified as F. I literally lay down on the ditch like a coward and couldn't see shit and just waited for whoever I assumed was currently murdering a woman to get the F out. I started remembering all the urban legends of people running away from the local insane asylum and killing themselves or others in the forest. Killing themselves, part is true by the way, happens every few years. Around 10 minutes later with no action, I ran back as fast as I could and called the police. They found nothing apparently. I really don't know what happened. I'm going to stay away from there for a few weeks though. It was a dark and stormy night. A man and his wife were on a trip and needed a place to stay. So on their drive through the dark back roads, they come across a motel. Despite its creepy appearance, they decide to try it anyway because they're tired and the roads are getting dangerous. The couple is in luck because there is one last room open. Exhausted, they get to their room and fall into the bed. They're asleep for a while when the wife wakes up to a noise. At first she thinks she's imagining it, but the more she hears it, the more she decides there's no way it's the storm, but rather voices, whispering. It almost sounds like chanting. Scared, she wakes up her husband and makes him listen. He hears nothing and tells her to go back to bed. She tries to, but sure enough, the noise starts up again, this time a little louder. So she wakes up her husband again and makes him listen. He hears nothing and tells her to go back to bed. A little while later, the noise picks up yet again, a little louder. The wife is now terrified, but doesn't want to annoy her husband anymore, so she decides to investigate. She begins to listen for the noise and try to locate its source. As she moves through the dark softly, listening, she realizes it's not coming from either the neighbors or from outside their doorway. In fact, as she walks closer and closer to it, she feels her heart sink as she realizes it's coming from their bathroom. So now, beyond scared, something compels her to open up the door to the bathroom and flip on the light. As she does, she sees nothing but the toilet and a closed shower. The chanting and talking paused for a second when she flipped the switch, but is now softly started up again. Now she can start to make out the words. When the log rolls over, we're all going to die. She approaches the shower and throws back the curtain only to reveal an empty shower. She stands puzzled and then realizes that the only place left to look is in the closed toilet. She reaches forward and lifts the lid slowly, only to reveal 3 cockroaches sitting on a turd, chanting, when the log rolls over, we're all going to die. So she flushed the toilet and watched as the log rolled over and killed all 3 cockroaches. I was hoping for more. As I was reading this story, I thought it was alliterative and well written, a little creepy, and I liked it. And then it had an ending that my 8-year-old would laugh at. In New Jersey, I grew up hearing some terrifying things, I bet. The one that scares me the most is the story of Annie's Road. The version I was told was, a girl named Annie was waiting to be picked up from her boyfriend. They got into a horrible argument and he kicked her out of the car. She walked home by herself until a bunch of drunken sailors offered her a ride, raped her, and brutally murdered her before throwing her body onto the road and driving away. It is said that at night, she will appear as a hitchhiker, and when you pick her up, you will lose control of your car, or, if you swerve to avoid her, you'll crash and die. To summon her, simply turn off your headlights and tune into the oldies station. You should see her in the rearview mirror. Apparently, after her death sometime in the 60s, her father would come to the guardrail where her blood was splattered and paint it red every year in hopes she will visit. My mother supposedly saw the guy painting it red once. The Devil's Tree is another scary thing in New Jersey. I won't dare go near. The one that I've come the closest to believing is the Indigo Children. Around when my sister was 10 to 12, she would talk about seeing people in her room. They would never harm her, they'd just sit there while she slept. They scared her, but not for any other reason than she thought they shouldn't be there. My parents told her she was just having nightmares and it'd be fine. One day my sister told our grandmother about this and she immediately started telling stories about our aunt who had the same thing. People who looked like they didn't belong watching her sleep. My grandmother said that our aunt woke her up every night for years and took her into her room to point at an empty chair or corner and ask her to make them leave. Sometime later, my grandmother claimed she discovered that many children have this type of thing happen. They're called Indigo Children, and what they are seeing is dead people. My only Ouija experience, oh boy. Me and my buddies were fresh out of high school, so early 20s give or take. We thought it would be an awesome idea to take a board into a cemetery with us on Halloween night. Perfect. We get there and take out the board, start messing around with it. We get some movement on the board. Of course, the whole, dude, stop moving it. I'm not moving it, you are. What the heck stuff. Some punk teenagers happen upon us, so we invite them to sit down, partake in our marijuana, and just chill with us. They were real dick butts, being loud and disrespectful about the whole thing. The board stopped moving when they were with us. Once they left, the board began moving again. We think we contacted somebody or something. The board's moving. It's spelling out a name for us, giving us yes or no answers, the whole 9 yards. Finally, the board spells out, "Leave now," or something like that. We ask, why do we need to leave? And the board responds, "You are last." Over and over again, "You are last." So this freaks us right the F out. We say goodbye to the spirit and pack up and begin to head towards my friend's car. As we get to the car, there's a cop sitting in the parking lot. Of course, me, being the obtuse mother effer that I am, I volunteer to go up to the cop and speak with him, so we don't look suspicious, or he doesn't just flash us and pull us over and we pull out of the parking lot, etc. As I'm approaching the cop, he rolls down his window. I see he is tapping out on his computer and writing down on a ticket pad. I'm polite and respectful. "Good evening, officer." "Oh, we're just here trying to give ourselves a little bit of Halloween scare, He asks us if we saw anyone else, because there was a second car in the parking lot as well. And we say that yes, we did see a group of kids, but we parted ways about 30 minutes ago, and we don't know where they are, etc. The cop is like, "All right, which car is yours?" And I point to my friend's car, and he just says, "Okay, you guys can go. And don't do this in the future, okay?" I'm like, "Yes, officer, no problem. Are we going to get a ticket or something?" I said, motioning to the ticket pad he's writing on. The cop says, "Nope. Just as luck would have it, I'm writing up this other car first. You have a good timing that you came back to the car when you did. I was going to do your car last." We noped the F out of there after politely excusing ourselves.
Do we even need to say it? At least it had a happy ending.
The Weeping Woman, La Llorona. This is a story that the old ones have been telling to children for hundreds of years. It is a sad tale, but it lives strong in the memories of the people, and there are many who swear that it is true. Long years ago, in a humble little village, there lived a fine-looking girl named Maria. Some say she was the most beautiful girl in the world, and because she was so beautiful, Maria thought she was better than everyone else. As Maria grew older, her beauty increased, and her pride in her beauty grew too. When she was a young woman, she would not even look at the young men from her village. They weren't good enough for her. When I marry, Maria would say, I will marry the most handsome man in the world. And then one day, into Maria's village rode a man who seemed to be just the one she had been talking about. He was a dashing young ranchero, the son of a wealthy rancher from the southern plains. He could ride like a Comanche. In fact, he owned a horse, and it grew tame. He would give it away and go rope a wild horse from the plains. He thought it wasn't manly to ride a horse if it wasn't half wild. He was handsome, and he could play the guitar and sing beautifully. Maria made up her mind that was the man for her. She knew just the tricks to win his attention. If the ranchero spoke when they met on the pathway, she would turn her head away. When he came to her house in the evening to play his guitar and serenade her, she would even come to the window. She refused all his costly gifts. The young man fell for her tricks. That haughty girl, Maria, Maria, he said to himself, I know I can win her heart. I swear I'll marry that girl. And so everything turned out as Maria planned. Before long, she and the ranchero became engaged, and soon they were married. At first things were fine. They had 2 children, and they seemed to be a happy family together. But after a few years, the ranchero went back to the wild life of the prairies. He would leave town and be gone for months at a time, and when he returned home, it was only to visit his children. He seemed to care nothing for the beautiful Maria. He even talked of setting Maria aside and marrying a woman of his own wealthy class. As proud as Maria was, of course, she became very angry with the ranchero. She also began to feel anger toward her children because he paid attention to them but just ignored her. One evening, as Maria was strolling with her 2 children on the shady pathway near the river, the ranchero came by in a carriage. An elegant lady sat on the seat beside him. He stopped and spoke to his children, but he didn't even look at Maria. He whipped the horses up on the street. When she saw that, a terrible rage filled Maria, and it all turned against her children. And although it is said to tell, the story says that in her anger, Maria seized her 2 children and threw them into the river. But as they disappeared down the stream, she realized what she had done. She ran down the bank of the river, reaching out her arms to them, but they were long gone. The next morning, a traveler brought word to the villagers that a beautiful woman lay dead on the bank of the river. That is where they found Maria, and they laid her to rest where she had fallen. But the first night Maria was in the grave, the villagers heard the sounds of crying down by the river. It was not the wind, it was La Llorona crying, "Where are my young children?" And they saw a woman walking up and down the bank of the river, dressed in a long white robe, the way they had dressed Maria for burial. On many a dark night, they saw her walk the riverbank and cry for her children, and so they no longer spoke of her as Maria. They called her La Llorona, the Weeping Woman, and by that name she is known to this day. Children are warned not to go out in the dark, for La Llorona might snatch them and never return them.
In narrating for this channel for a while now, I've read about La Llorona many times, but this was probably the most descriptive, so thanks for sharing.
Why elevators have stop buttons, Korean urban legend. Story goes like, a particular high school girl, who most other students in Korea that have Hakwan, Profit Private Institute Academy or cram school, gets on elevator one night. Now, students coming home late from Hakwan are one of the common daily routines for many students in Korea. As the elevator door is about to close, a man in his early mid-20s or early 30s puts his hand between the door and walks in at the last second. Well, nice to meet you. I guess we are neighbors. I live right below you. And he proceeds to press the 13th floor. For a few brief minutes, they have friendly conversation. He speaks in manners that would put anyone at ease, and the girl finds herself very comfortable talking to this man. The elevator eventually reaches the 13th floor, and the man gets off. As the door is closing, girl sees the man turning around with a crazy smile on his face, taking a knife out, waving at her, "Meet you upstairs." The next day, the girl is found dead. People say it wasn't the killing itself that made the experience so utterly terrifying, but the sheer terror the girl must have felt in between the time as the elevator went up, knowing there's nothing she can do to avoid her death. I don't know if anyone remembers this one, but there was one about a couple that was in a car under a tree. The car had ran out of gas, so the boyfriend was going to walk to the nearest gas station. The girlfriend begs and begs him to stay, but he refuses. He makes her promise she won't leave the car no matter what she sees or hears, so she's alone in the darkness, and then she hears muffled cries, and she huddled herself in the car, and then something starts scratching the car violently, but still she stays inside, and the scratching soon subsides to a steady drip, drip, drip. Then she falls asleep. The next morning, she's woken by the police. They tell her to get out of the car, walk away, and not to turn back. Of course, she doesn't listen, so she turns around and sees her boyfriend's body hanging headless over the car. His nails bloodied and down to the bone from his scratching. Terrified me as a child. Joshua Jackson. I guess it's not really an urban legend, but it still creeps me out to think about it. I live in Utah near the cave that Ted Bundy would use to hide bodies and stuff. I went up there with a group of friends when I was 17, and we went into the cave around midnight. We were camping up the canyon a ways and walked down to explore. As far as we knew, there wasn't anyone else near us in the canyon. We went to the cave and didn't see anything of interest. Shining our flashlights, there was some rocks that looked like someone had stacked on top of each other to form some sort of shrine or altar or something like that. Mainly, there was just that creepy, ominous feeling because of the thought that it was in this cave that Bundy had raped and murdered so many women. It wasn't that cool, so we just left. Returning to the campsite, sitting around the fire, we started roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories. 2 hours later, my buddy suggested we go back and tell ghost stories inside the cave. Terrible idea. When we returned around 2 a.m., we flashed our lights around the cave and they landed on that rock shining thing. It was broken, like someone had pushed it over and there was something wet on it, like it had been dripped on top of it. Following the drip trail, we saw wet red paint. I guess it was paint. Above it that read, "Get out." None of that was there when we had first explored it 2 hours ago. We got the hell out, jumped in our cars, and went and slept in our own houses that night. I told my little brother about it last month. He and his friends went to check it out. He said that "Get out" was still on the wall. When I was a kid, I lived in a very old 3-story house in Clinton, Louisiana. My great-grandmother owned it and passed it through my family on my dad's side. Every night you could hear footsteps when everyone was asleep, obviously, coming up and down the spiral wooden stairwell. Sometimes you could even hear the faint cries of a baby really late at night. We had no neighbors nearby for at least half a mile. Some nights I would be so scared that I would call out to my older brother, who would be scared shitless of all the noises he heard in and around his room. But when I would scream for him, note I was 13 at the time and not really all that stupid, he was 18, he would come running into my room and sleep next to me. This happened at least 3 times a week. There are many more stories, but they're too long to write at the moment. We sold the house in the end. The people who bought it tried to renovate it, but could not keep any workers there long enough than a couple days due to the bizarre and sometimes violent happenings. True story, bro. That might be the best spelling of bizarre I've ever seen.